very small country, with deserted dunes on the seaside, pierced by canals and rich in pastures only. The wheat that grows there is not even enough to feed the pythons and chickens. Holland is a land floating on water, so poor that it could not feed 1/5 of its inhabitants, and its meadows flooded most of the year. 17th century traveler. This is the story of a small country that managed to become the richest empire of its time. This is the story of the Netherlands. 17 provinces of the Netherlands belonged to the Spanish Habsburgs. They were so rich that they brought the Spanish king more money than the Spanish colonies in America. Suffering from high taxes and the religious abuse of Catholic Spain, in 1581, 7 provinces revolted and proclaimed an independent Dutch republic. Only after a long war, in 1648, Spain recognized the independence of the northern Netherlands, while the southern Netherlands remained Spanish. The 7 provinces had their local legislative assemblies, composed mainly of wealthy urban patricians and the local oligarchy. They elected the Stadthouder, the head of the army and navy, and also delegated representatives from their province to the General States, the main parliament of the Republic, where the country's policy was determined. Holland had the greatest influence on decision-making. It was the richest province. As described by contemporaries, it was a poor country where there was never enough land to feed its inhabitants, and land suitable for agriculture was often flooded. The inhabitants had no choice but to become a nation of traders and entrepreneurs in order to survive. The religious wars that broke out in Europe pushed huge masses of cheap labor to the Netherlands, where tolerance was practiced. The Dutch used this advantage in the maritime business. French report from 1696. The French are forced to keep 5 men on a 20-ton ship when the Dutch keep 2 to 3 sailors. The French sailor receives 12 to 16 livres and the Dutch 10 to 12. Of all nations, says the foreigner, the Dutch are the most frugal and the most temperate. Dutch created the flute, a large capacity ship requiring 20% fewer sailors, and shipbuilding was much cheaper. This became a significant advantage for the Netherlands. By the end of the 16th century, the number of Dutch ships was greater than that of the whole of Northern Europe combined. The Netherlands became an international shipping company, but simply transporting goods was not quite profitable. The Dutch became merchants in addition to seafarers. If France was short of grain due to crop failures, they talked to Dutch merchants who outfitted their ships and brought wheat from the Baltic. If the Spanish needed lots of iron, timber, and clothing for their American colonies, they turned to the Dutch, who bought timber and iron from the Baltic and Sweden in return for Spanish goods from the New World. According to historian Fernand Braudel, by 1550, the Netherlands were transporting 5/6 of all goods between northern and southern Europe, and Amsterdam had become a major hub in Europe. Antwerp was already known as the main trading city in northern Europe in the 15th century. Here, Portuguese merchants sold pepper, brought from the east to German merchants. But during the war with Spain, in 1585, Antwerp was captured. Most of the merchants left for Amsterdam, which was destined to become the richest city in Europe. An eyewitness wrote in 1699, "I compare Amsterdam to a fair, where many merchants bring goods from their own countries, confident that they will be bought up quickly, and many stock their goods, waiting for high prices to sell them at a profit. Grain, furs, wood from the Baltic, iron and fish from Sweden, wool from England, wine from France, glass from Venice, silk from the Middle East, spices and dyes from Asia, tobacco, sugar, and silver from the Americas. Goods from all over the world flowed to Amsterdam, where they were reloaded onto other ships and shipped onward or stored in packhouses, warehouses from where the goods were eventually shipped to buyers. It was not uncommon for English goods destined for France to arrive first in Holland and then shipped to France. This was unprofitable, but there was nothing they could do. Dutch merchants controlled all European trade, they had influence, and most importantly, money. Maritime trade was only a part of the majesty of the Netherlands. Dutch and Zeeland sailors controlled much of the herring fishery in the North Sea and were pioneers in whaling. Citing sources, 1,500 ships and over 15,000 sailors were involved in the fishery. With no arable land, the inhabitants of the Netherlands were forced into manufacturing. The production of cloth was a high-tech industry. Dutch merchants bought up raw cloth in England, dyed it, and sold it at several times the cost of English raw materials. Even King James I's prohibitions on the sale of raw wool could not prevent this. The huge number of manufactories and shipyards contributed to the high concentration of people in the cities. According to various estimates, by 1650, the number of urban dwellers was up to 50%, which was insanely high. The Dutch trading empire was always in need of sailors, and manufactories needed cheap laborers. The Netherlands happily welcomed German and French laborers who flooded the Netherlands in search of a better life. As the Dutch were so rich that they no longer wanted to work for the same money. Amsterdam grew 20 times in 2 centuries and was undoubtedly the richest city of its time. But Europe wasn't enough. The real money was in the East. But more on that in the next part.